I stood in my daughter's empty bedroom, clutching a piece of paper that felt like it was made of lead, staring at the 5 words that had just shattered what was left of my world. Do not follow me. Sarah, my husband, the man I had shared 25 years of my life with, was gone, and I knew exactly where he was going. He was going to find the 3 men who had walked out of a courtroom as free individuals just 48 hours ago, despite the fact that they had taken our little girl away from us in a hit and run that the police called an accident, but we called a murder. Do you think a mother can just sit back and watch her husband throw his life away for a revenge that might not even bring him back? Would you have stayed behind like he asked, or would you have chased him into the darkness? I need you to tell me if I'm the crazy one here, because as I stand in this silence, I feel like my heart is actually breaking for the 2nd time in 6 months. 6 months ago, our daughter Lily was coming home from her shift at the library. She was 21, full of life, and just weeks away from graduating college with honors. She was crossing at a marked light when a black SUV, speeding at twice the limit, blew through a red light and hit her. They didn't even tap the brakes. Witnesses said the car slowed down for a second, just long enough for the driver to see what they'd done, and then they peeled off, leaving my baby girl on the cold asphalt. By the time Mark and I got to the hospital, she was already gone. The detectives found the car 2 days later, abandoned in a ditch, and eventually they traced it back to a group of 3 young men with wealthy parents and very expensive lawyers. We thought justice would be served. We believed in the system. But during the trial, key evidence was suppressed because of a technicality with the search warrant, and the witnesses were intimidated into changing their stories. When the judge read the not guilty verdict, I felt the air leave my lungs, but Mark didn't make a sound. He just sat there, his eyes fixed on the back of the lead defendant's head, a cold, terrifying stillness settling over him that I had never seen in all our years of marriage. He didn't cry when we got home. He didn't even scream. He just started spending all his time in the garage or at his desk, staring at a map of the city and a stack of folders he'd compiled. I thought he was just grieving in his own way, trying to make sense of the senseless. I never imagined he was planning a calculated, systematic hunt. He started going out at night, claiming he couldn't sleep and needed to walk. But I noticed the mileage on his truck was increasing by hundreds of miles every week. He grew distant, his voice becoming a monotone shell of what it used to be. When I tried to reach out to hold him, he felt like a statue. Then came this morning. I woke up to a cold bed and that note on the kitchen table. He'd taken his hunting gear, his offshore bank account access, and the burner phone he'd bought a month ago. He wasn't just looking for closure. He was looking for blood. I spent the next 3 hours frantically trying to piece together where he had gone. Mark had been a private investigator before he retired to run his own security firm, so he knew how to disappear, but he also knew how to find people who didn't want to be found. I went into his office and started digging through his trash, through his browser history, through everything he thought he'd cleared. That's when I found the photos. He had been following them, the 3 boys who killed Lily. He had their schedules, their addresses, and photos of them laughing at a bar just days after the trial ended. They looked so happy, so untouched by the tragedy they had caused. I saw a map with a red circle around a remote cabin upstate, a place owned by the family of the driver. My blood ran cold. Mark wasn't just going to confront them. He was going to finish what the legal system refused to start. I jumped in my car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. I had to stop him, not because I cared about those boys, but because I couldn't lose him too. If he killed them, he'd spend the rest of his life in prison, and I would truly be alone. I'm halfway to that cabin now, driving through a literal storm that feels like a physical manifestation of the mess my life has become. I keep thinking about the moment I saw those boys in court, their smirks and their expensive suits. I hated them with a passion that scared me. But is vengeance worth the soul of the man I love? I really need your perspective right now. If you were in Mark's shoes, seeing the killers of your child walk free, would you have done what he's doing? Or if you were me, would you even try to stop him? Or would you let him get the justice the world denied you? Pause for a second and leave a comment below, because I genuinely don't know if I'm doing the right thing by trying to save him from himself. The drive felt like an eternity, every mile a battle against the rain and my own intrusive thoughts. When I finally saw his truck parked a mile down the road from the cabin, hidden behind a thicket of pine trees, I knew I was too late or just in time. I approached the cabin on foot, the mud clinging to my boots, the silence of the woods only broken by the distant sound of music coming from the house. They were partying. They were celebrating their freedom in the very place Mark had tracked them to. I saw a shadow move near the back porch. It was Mark. He was dressed in all black, moving with a terrifying, silent precision. He had a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder, but in his hand he held a heavy, duty zip tie and a canister of something I didn't want to identify. I screamed his name, my voice cracking the heavy air. He froze. When he turned to look at me, his eyes weren't the eyes of the man I married. They were hollow, filled with a dark, bottomless grief that had finally consumed him. He told me to go back to the car, that this wasn't for me to see, but I wouldn't budge. I grabbed his arm and begged him to think about Lily, about how she was the light of our lives, and how she would never want her father to become a murderer. We stood there in the rain, a desperate tug-of war between love and hate, while the muffled sounds of laughter drifted from the cabin where the three men were oblivious to the death hovering at their door. I told him that if he went inside, he was killing the last piece of Lily that lived on in him. He hesitated, the rifle shaking in his grip, and for a moment I thought I'd reached him. Then the front door of the cabin opened, and the driver stepped out, stumbling, clearly drunk, and shouting something offensive into the night. The sight of him acted like a physical blow to Mark. He didn't shoot, though. Instead, he walked right up into the light, revealing himself. The look of pure, unadulterated terror on that boy's face when he realized who was standing there was something I'll never forget. Mark didn't pull the trigger. He just held up a recording device and played the sound of Lily's voice from an old home movie, then told the boy that he would be watched every single second for the rest of his life, that justice wasn't a bullet. It was the constant, gnawing fear that someone was coming for him. He left them with the realization that their freedom was now a prison of looking over their shoulders. We walked away that night, and while Mark didn't get the revenge some might have wanted, he kept his humanity. The aftermath hasn't been easy. Mark is in intensive therapy, and we are trying to rebuild a life that was leveled to the ground. Those three men ended up turning on each other out of pure paranoia, and one of them eventually confessed to a different crime just to get into protective custody. It wasn't the ending I expected, but it was the one we needed to survive. This experience taught me that grief is a monster that can turn the best people into something unrecognizable if you let it. I chose to save my husband, and in doing so, I think I saved myself too. If this story touched you or made you think about what you'd do for your family, please like this video to show your support for our journey. Subscribe to the channel for more raw, real stories from the depths of human experience, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did Mark make the right call by letting them live in fear, or should he have finished it? I'll see you all in the next story.